In this video, you will get lessons from this #1 bestseller book. I'm offering this lesson to you for free as part of my company's mission to help you reach your music dreams and have fun along the way. You will find the playlist with all videos from this course in the video description and comments. There may be information in previous videos that will make the video you are watching now easier to understand. I recommend watching the videos in order. Hi, I'm Dan Spencer, author of the Best Music Theory book for beginners. Over 5,000 people have purchased this book, pushing it to hit #1 bestseller in its category on Amazon. Now, here is the next lesson and the Best Music Theory course, Level 1. Welcome to Rhythm 4. We're going to start off by talking about dotted notes, specifically the dotted half note, and the dotted half note is the only dotted note you're going to have to worry about for this entire course and this entire Level 1, all the books, all the work pages. We're only ever going to be looking at a dotted half note. There are other dotted notes, but we're not going to worry about those for now. So let's look at how we make a dotted half note. So we have a stem, we have a note, and sure enough, living up to its name, we've got right here the dot. So open note head, stem, and dot. Now let's talk a little bit about the math of what that dot means. A dotted note is worth 1.5 times the written note's rhythmic value. Let's break that down. So what we're saying is that whenever we have a dot on a note, right here, we got the dot, this equals 1.5 times that. 1.5 times the written note's value. So we have a half note, which is worth how many beats? 2. Another way of thinking about it is and 1.5 times 2 equals 3. Another way of thinking about that is 1.5 plus 1.5, which equals 3. One more way of thinking about this math is to quite simply divide the written note value in half and add it to itself. So we look at the written note value. That equals 2. Half of 2 is 1. 1 plus 2 equals 3. So whenever you see a dotted note, it's going to be worth 1.5 times the written value. And we can see right here, half note gets 2 counts, quarter note gets 1 count. 1 plus 2 equals a dotted half note, which is 3. Let's break that down one more time before we talk about how to write half notes. So, a dotted note is like a regular note. It just has a dot. Now, what the dot means is that you take half this note's value right here. So whatever the dot is for, this dot is on a half note. So you take the half note, you say to yourself, how many beats is a half note worth? That's 2 beats. What's half of 2? 1. Add those together. 2 plus 1 equals 3. And that's how you understand how many beats a dotted note is worth. I'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to talk about how to write dotted notes, and we're going to do this lesson in 2 parts. The first part, I'm just going to talk you through it. I'm going to point out some things from the book, and in the second part, I'm actually going to write some dotted half notes with you in real time so you can follow along and do it with me. So, all you're going to do to write a dotted note is you're going to write the regular note. So in this case, half note. You write the note value, half note. Number 2, you write a small dot right next to the note head. Number 3, if the note head is on a line, you write the dot above the line. And if the note head is in a space, you write the dot in the space. Because you wouldn't want to write the dot on the line because then you might miss it if you put the dot right there. Obviously, you can see that one because it's green, but I think you understand my meaning. But if it was right on the line, you might miss it. So, if the note head is on the line, the dot goes above the line. If the note head is in the space, the dot goes in the same space as the note head. So now we're going to write some half notes together. Follow along with me. We're going to start by writing a note head on line 3 of the staff. Boom. I'm going to write a stem. Boom. Then we're going to write a dot. And remember, because the note head is on a line, we're going to write the dot above the line. There you go. That's it. Let's try writing a half note on space 2. All right, so let's put our note head right in the space. Then let's write the stem. And then because it's in the space, the dot's going to go in the same space as the note. And that dot's actually a little close. You can space the dots out just a little bit more. There you go. That's better. That's some breathing room there. All right, I'm going to write out a couple more. I'm not going to talk through it. I'm just going to give you a demonstration. Follow along, pause the video, whatever you need to do. Then dots above the line or in the space. One more. In the space. And there you go. That is how you write dotted half notes. I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to write dotted half notes in measures. Now, just like we had rules about where we could write our whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, whole rests, half rests, and quarter rests, we're also going to have some rules about where we can write dotted half notes. Now, the first thing to understand about dotted half notes is just like regular half notes, they can cross the divide between beats 2 and 3. So you can write a dotted half note on beat 1 or beat 2 in 4/4, or you can just write it on beat 1 in 3/4. So you can write a dotted half note on beat 1 or 2 in 4/4 because it can cross that imaginary divide between beats 2 and 3. Now you'll notice that we have a strongest and a weak beat color here for dotted half notes. Now keep in mind that that weak beat only works for 4/4 because we go strongest, weak, strong, weakest. That leaves us 3. So we have weak, strong, weakest. That's 3 beats, 3 counts. You can write a dotted half note starting on beat 2 in 4/4, but you cannot write a dotted half note starting on the weak beat of 3/4. Because think about it, 3/4 we have strongest, weak, weakest. If you wrote a half note here, there's only 2 beats left. You'd have an extra beat, which would make it 4 beats, which, as you may recall from your correct and incorrect measure math examples, would be no good. So dotted half notes can only go on the strongest beat, or beat 1 of 3/4, and they fill up the entire measure. So let's look at some examples here. We can see in 4/4, it is correct. We have already drawn for us that imaginary divide between beats 2 and 3, and we already have an arrow showing, yes, that dotted half note starts on beat 1 and can go all the way through to beat 3, and it's totally cool, and it can go past that imaginary barrier. It is also correct to write a dotted half note in 4/4 on beat 2 on the weak beat because it can pass through that imaginary divide between beats 2 and 3. Lastly, but not leastly, it is correct to write a dotted half note on beat 1 in 3/4. And that being said, do not make the mistake of writing a dotted half note on beat 2 with like a quarter note here, because that would equal 4 beats. And as we know from our measure math, no good. Also, do not write a dotted half note on beat 3 in 4/4 because that would equal 5. Let's say we have, a quarter rest there. All right, that equals 5. So no good. So now what you can do is you can actually start using dotted quarter notes in your original rhythmic compositions for either 4 measures or 8 measures. Just remember to use them on strongest beats and weak beats only in 4/4. I will see you in the next lesson where we're actually going to clap and count some dotted half notes. See you there. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about how to clap, or rather taa, dotted notes. Now, the reason why we're going to taa, we're actually going to use our voice to go taa. Try that one time. Right. So we go taa, and that is so that we can actually hear the full rhythmic duration of the note. So think about it this way. If we just clap 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, was that a whole note or was that a quarter note? You can't tell because I just clapped on the one. You could hear the attack happened on count 1, but you couldn't actually hear the duration of the note. So hopefully by now you've done a little bit of clapping, a little bit of counting. You understand how the whole thing works. So we're going to take the counting with your mouth out of the equation. We're actually going to use your mouth to say ta for different notes. So for example, if I was to ta a whole note, so metronome at 60, feel the pulse, and here I go, ta. See how I held that out for 4 counts or 4 beats, right? That's a whole note. Now this would be 2 half notes. Ta, ta. Now these would be quarter notes. Ta, 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 ta. This would be a dotted half note. Ta, 3. So what we're going to do now is actually ta examples 23 and 24. Here we go. Going to listen for the pulse. Double check the time signature. 4/4. All right, the count is. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. Excellent. Let's do example 24 now. Okay, this is the first time you've seen 4 lines of music all in a row. So keep in mind, from first line to second line to third line to fourth line, left to right, top to bottom, just like you would with a book. Okay, so listening for the pulse. Again, it's 60. Double checking the time signature, that's a 3. So my counted is going to be for 3, not 4, but 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Ta, 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 ta. I will see you in the next lesson. In the next couple of lessons, we're going to be talking about tied notes. So first, let's understand what ties are, how they work, and what they do. So ties connect notes together. Tied notes, when you tie 2 notes together, are worth the rhythmic value of both the notes connected by the tie. So let's say we have a quarter note, we tie it to another quarter note. 1 + 1 equals 2 beats or 2 counts. Let's say we have a half note tied to a quarter note. Half note gets 2 beats, 2 counts. Quarter note gets 1 beat, 1 count. Tie them together. You add them together. That's going to be 3 beats, 3 counts. So tied notes make the duration of notes longer by connecting the notes together. And interestingly, the second note of the tie does not get an attack. You're just going to hold it out like we did with the tas. Now, ties can connect notes in many ways. Number 1, they can combine the rhythmic value of 2 or more notes in the same measure, but you're not going to see that in this book, and you're actually not even going to write that in this book or in your workbook. Number 2, combine the rhythmic value of 2 or more notes in connecting measures. Now this one you're going to see a lot of ties connecting notes from one measure to the next, both in your workbook and in this book and in this course. Number 3, they combine the rhythmic value of 2 or more notes from one line of staff to another line of staff, and you will see that also in this course, in this book, and in your workbooks. Let's start off by taking a look at quarter notes tied to other notes and how many beats that would be worth. Let's zoom in here. Okay, so we have a quarter note tied to a quarter note. That's 1 plus 1. That would equal 2 beats, 2 counts. Here's a quarter note tied to a half note. That's 1 plus 2. That would equal 3. Half note tied to a quarter note. Same thing as a quarter note tied to a half note. 2 plus 1 equals 3. Now, a quarter note tied to a dotted half, that's going to be 1 plus 3. That's going to equal 4 beats or 4 counts. But remember, you're not actually going to put the ties in measures. You're only ever going to tie notes coming from one measure to another measure. So you're never going to write, for example, a quarter note tied to a dotted half note in one measure instead of a whole note. You just write a whole note because that's worth 4 beats, 4 counts. A dotted half note tied to a quarter note, that's 3 beats plus 1 beat. That equals 4 again. And a quarter note tied to a whole note, which would equal 5 beats or 5 counts, as the inverse as well. 4 beats, 4 counts for the whole note, plus 1 beat, 1 count for the quarter note equals 5 beats or 5 counts. Now let's look at some tied half notes. So if we tie a half note to a dotted half note, that's going to be worth 5 beats, 5 counts, because 2 plus 3. The inverse is true. 3 beats plus 2, that's going to equal 5 beats. And again, these are not going to go in one measure. And then a half note plus a whole note, that's going to equal 6 beats. Same as the inverse. And you could also tie, for example, a dotted half note to a whole note to get 7 beats worth of time. So to give you an example, I'm actually going to taw through some of these with a metronome. Here's our 2 quarter notes tied together. This is what it sounds like. Ta. Right, 2 beats, 2 counts, and I don't taw the second one. Here's our quarter note tied to our half note. I'm going to taw through it. Ta. See, I didn't do another taw. There was no attack on the second note. I just hold the taw through it. Okay, and here is, well, let's do one over here. Let's do a quarter note plus a dotted half note. Ta. Right, because that's 1 plus 3. That equals 4 total. Now let's do something from down here. Let's do a dotted half plus a half. Here we go. Ta. So 5 beats or 5 counts. For that, I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to have 2 parts to talk about how to write tied notes. First, I'm going to talk at you. I'm going to point to some things. Second, I'm actually going to go onto some staff paper and write it down in real time and talk you through it as I do it. So let's talk about tied notes on or above line 3 or the middle line of the staff. So number 1, you're going to write notes you wish to connect with a tie on the same line or space of the staff. This is super important. Tied notes can only be on the same line or space of the staff as the other notes that they are tied to. Number 2, you're going to write the tie from just above the first note head to just above the second note head, and we can see that. Yep, sure enough, from measure 1 to measure 2, we have 2 quarter notes there, and then we write that tie arching over when it's above line 3. Now, tied notes below the middle line of the staff or tied notes below line 3, we're going to write the note heads or the notes you want to connect with a tie on the same line or space of the staff. Remember, you can only tie notes together when they're on the same line or space of the staff. Number 2, you're going to write the tie from just below the first note head to just below the second note head. So you can see, let's zoom in, right? We have 2 quarter notes, and then we have the 2 quarter notes connected with a tie from one measure to the next. And remember that in level 1, we're only ever going to be tying from one measure to the next. We're not going to be tying notes in a measure, in the same measure. All right, let's jump into some staff paper and let's write a couple examples. Okay, so here we are on some staff paper. We're just going to practice tying quarter notes to half notes, dotted half notes, and Whole notes, no measures, no time signatures, no clefs. We're just going to practice writing the note heads, the stems, and then the ties. So we're going to start with, perhaps a quarter note on line 3 of the staff. Good stem. And we're going to tie that to a half note. Just like that. Then the tie arches over just above the first note head to just above the second note head. See, my line got a little squiggly there. It's okay if your lines get a little squiggly too. Okay, let's write now a quarter note to a dotted half note. Just doing the note heads. We're going to do this in space 2. Here's our quarter note. Now let's write a dotted half note. Dot. And because these note heads are below line 3 of the staff, we're going to tie under just below the first note head to just below the second note head. Excellent. Now let's practice tying to a whole note from a quarter note. So let's write a quarter note. You're on line 4 of the staff. And we're going to tie that to a whole note. Also, oops, I misspoke. I said line 4, I meant space 4. We're going to tie this quarter note to a whole note also in space 4. There you go. I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk a little bit about the rules for using tied notes in measures. Now, first rule for tie notes is only use ties when you cannot use a note of a larger rhythmic value. Tie rule number 1 is you're only ever going to use a tie when a larger rhythmic value note cannot be used. So for example, you would never ever in a same measure tie a quarter note to a half note, because you could just write a dotted half note right there, because look, what we want here is 3 beats or 3 counts of sound. Ta. And the easier way to write that is just to put a dotted half note. So keep in mind, for level 1, we're only ever going to be looking for ties to go from one measure to the next measure. That's level 1. We're never going to be tying notes in measures, and that just has to do with the math of how the ties work out. It's not an arbitrary rule that I'm just making up for you. It's literally that there's no combination of beats for sound all in a row that you could make with a tie that you cannot do with either a quarter, half, whole, or dotted half note within a single measure. Now, ties cannot skip over rests. So you cannot tie a note to another note and skip over a rest. And remember that ties on or above line 3 of the staff arch over, whereas ties below line 3 of the staff arch under. So let's unpack some of these correct and incorrect examples. We already talked about this first one here. Now this is incorrect because, look, what do we want out of this? What we're essentially saying is we want beats 1, 2, and 3 to have sound, right? We want sound for beats 1, 2, and 3. And right now, that's what we've got. We got sound starting here, lasting through to here. But that's no good because we don't need ties and measures. All we need is for 3 beats of continuous sound to have a dotted half note. That's all you need. Right here. This one is incorrect because, okay, what essentially do we want to have happen here? Essentially what we want here is we want this note here to continue sounding all the way through to this note here. So, in other words, we want beats 1, 2, and 3 to have sound. Much easier way of doing that. If you want beats 1, 2, and 3 to have sound, just write a dotted half note. It's going to make your life a lot easier. So how do we write notes in connecting measures? Because that's what we're going to be doing primarily in level 1, is we're going to write ties from one measure to the next or from one line to the next. So we can see here that step number 1 is you write all the notes you want, including the notes you're going to tie together. And step number 2 is, yep, boom, you just add the tie. That's it. Now it gets a little bit more tricky, and something to pay attention to is writing a tied note from one line of the staff to the next line. So number 1, you're going to write your rhythmic composition. You're going to write out your notes. You're going to figure out where the tie is in your mind, and then you're going to show the beginning of the tie from the first line, and then you're going to show the end of the tie on the next line. See that? I'm going to zoom out so you can see the whole thing. So what we're saying is that this note right here lasts all the way through to here. So that's essentially a quarter note plus a whole note, which equals 5 beats or 5 counts. Award for the messiest quarter note and whole note goes to Dan Spencer. So you get the idea that it starts here. It starts in measure 4 and continues on into measure 5. So if I were to taa, I'm going to start taaing right here for measure 4. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. So you can see that ta starts here in measure 4, but it carries on for an additional 4 beats or 4 counts in measure 5. I will see you in the next lesson. This is going to be a little bonus lesson for how to tie more than 2 notes together. So I don't recommend you do this right away. As you start to incorporate ties into your rhythmic compositions, use them sparingly. Use 2 or 3 ties per 8 measures or 1 or 2 ties per 4 measures, because once you start getting into tie land, it gets real crazy and the notes start lasting for a really, really, really long time. So number 1, if you are going to tie more than 2 notes together, make sure that all the notes you are tying together are on the same line or space of the staff. Number 2, you're going to write ties showing that the notes are connected. And number 3, there's no limit technically for the number of ties that you can use in a row. So let's unpack this example a little bit because, well, it's a lot. So we have a total of 12 counts. Count them, 12 counts of tied notes here. So we start off with 3 counts with a dotted half note here, and then that's added to the 4 counts of the whole note, which is added to 4 counts of the whole note, which is added to 1 count of the quarter note. So 3 plus 4 plus 4 plus 1 equals 12. Now I'm going to take a real deep breath and taa this for you. Here we go. At 60. This is just an example. You don't need to taa this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, ta. All right. So that's a lot. So you can do that in your composition. Just watch out and make sure you're using the ties correctly. You're not tying notes within the same measure to each other. You're only ever tying notes from one measure to the next measure or from one line to the next line. I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be tying example 25 and 26 from the Best Music Theory book for beginners. We're doing it at 60. As you can see, we have our little 60 metronome sign there for our speed. Looking at the time signature, okay, it's 4/4, so the count is going to be for 4. Listening to the click. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. All right, this next one is 26. Again, 4 whole lines of music. Let's listen to the pulse. Again, at 60. Let's look at the time signature. Okay, time signature is a 3 on top, which means our count is going to be for 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Ta, 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 ta. ta, 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 ta. I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to be talking about repeat signs. Now, repeat signs are little symbols that look like this. See, it's sort of like a final bar line with two dots. And those symbols will help us actually repeat measures or entire lines of music, or maybe just one measure at a time. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through two examples in this lesson. We're going to go through example 27 and 28. And I'm going to break down for you what we're going to do, and then I'm going to talk through it. So in example 27, we're going to start in measure 1. We read through measure 1 all the way to the end, at which point we hit the repeat sign. The repeat sign is like a bumper. It bumps us back to the beginning of the piece of music, and then we read all the way from the beginning to the end. And that bumper is only worth one bump. That repeat sign doesn't continuously bump you back and forth forever. It just bumps you one time, and at the end, we treat it like a final bar line, and the song is over. So I'm going to Taa 27. Looking at and the time signature is for 4, so the count in is going to be for 4. Here we go. Get the pulse, count in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. Bounce back. Ta, 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 ta. Ta, ta. There you go. Now let's look at example 28. So example 28 is pretty interesting because instead of having one repeat sign just at the end, we also have a repeat sign here at the beginning. Now, you may see this when you are out in the wild reading and playing real pieces of music or analyzing real pieces of music. But here's the thing. This second, so we have 1, 2. We have one repeat sign, 2 repeat signs. This second repeat sign right here, it is called redundant. Redundant means it is not necessary. It doesn't actually do anything. However, there have been many people throughout history who have used that type of extra repeat sign there, even though it does not do anything. So this is more just to show you and to let you know that you may see this out in the world, but it's not actually important and you don't actually need to use it, and no extra action is required. You would still read the piece in the same way. You start from measure 1, you go through to measure 4, back to measure 1, through to measure 4. It works exactly the same as our single repeat sign that we saw up here, and that's why this is actually called single repeat sign 1, and this one is called single repeat sign 2. It's that even though there's 2 repeat signs, only one of the repeat signs actually matters and is actually doing any work. This bumps us back to the beginning, and we do not need this extra repeat sign here. It doesn't do anything. There's no extra bumping needed. It does not help you do anything. I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to talk about double repeat signs when they actually have 2 repeat signs that are doing something, not just one repeat sign at the beginning of the first measure and then the repeat sign in measure 4 that's doing all the work. So whenever you have a start repeat sign or a second repeat sign, so here's our first one right here. Here's our second one right here. And you see this one's facing in. This one's facing in. And it's like a backwards final bar line that's facing to the right as opposed to the left. We're actually going to bounce between these two. So yeah, let's unpack that. When we have a second one, 1, 2, in measure 1, at the beginning, before the notes start, if you have that repeat sign before the notes start, it doesn't do anything. It's redundant. However, If you have a second repeat sign that is after the note start, like right here, that's actually going to do something. So what's going to happen here is we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to read left to right like we always do. This repeat sign bumps us back to this repeat sign, which then bumps us to the end. So to taa it, here we go. Getting the pulse, looking at the time signature, it's 4/4, so counting is 4. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. Ta, ta. Ta, ta. Ta, ta. So that is how a double repeat sign works. It actually bounces us back and forth between the two repeat signs. Now let's look at a double repeat sign over 8 measures instead of 4 measures. So let's talk through this. Let's walk through this, and then I'll taa through it. So we're going to start left to right, top to bottom, as we would normally do. But here's what happens. We go like this. We go to second line. But what happens is that this repeat sign right here catches us before we can get to the end. So we're not allowed to go to this measure yet because we have this repeat sign before it. So this repeat sign is going to bounce us back. But where's it going to bounce us to? Not the beginning. Oh, but to that second repeat sign there, which is then going to bounce us all the way through. And the second time we ignore that repeat sign and we make it to the end. That was a little complicated. Go back, review this, read the page a bunch of times, look through those arrows, and I'm going to taa it one time for you, and hopefully that'll help make more sense for you as well. Here we go. Time sig is 4/4, so the countdown is going to be for 4. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ta, 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 ta. Ta, ta. Ta, 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 ta. I will see you in the next lesson. In the next 2 lessons, we're going to be talking about how to write repeat signs. In this lesson, we're just going to talk about how to write them, not in the context of music or in the context of measures, just writing repeat signs by themselves. We're going to do this lesson in 2 parts. First, I'm going to talk you through it, walk you through it, and then I'm actually going to write on some staff paper so you can copy me in real time or just see me do it as I talk you through it in real time. So we're going to talk about repeat signs in 2 different ways. We're going to talk about start repeat signs, and those are the ones with the dots on the right side, like this. And then we're going to talk about end repeat signs that have the dots on the left. So to write a start repeat sign, we need to write a backwards final bar line. That's step number 1. And then number 2, we add a dot above and below line 3 of the staff. And to write an end repeat sign, we write a regular final bar line, and then we write a dot above and below line 3 of the staff. To write a start repeat sign, we're going to start by writing a backwards final bar line. So that's going to be thick, thin, instead of thin, thick. There we go. And then a dot just above and below line 3 of the staff. And, we could color that in a little bit better. But that's basically the idea. Now, to write an end repeat sign, we're going to write a regular final bar line. Boom. That's going to be thin, thick. And then add a dot above and below line 3 of the staff. I will see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to write repeat signs into your compositions for either 4 measures or 8 measure original rhythmic compositions. We can see that how to write a repeat sign at the end of a line of staff, all you've got to do is set up your line of staff like you normally do. Divide it in half, divide it into quarters, add a final bar line, percussion clef, time signature, and all you're going to do, boop, add those 2 dots in there. So the only difference is that from the top to the bottom, we've got those 2 little dots right there. And that's basically it for writing a repeat sign. So if you want someone to go through something twice, all you got to do is write a repeat sign at the end, and you can do it at the end of 4 measures or at the end of 8 measures, either way. Now let's talk about how to write repeat signs in the middle of a line of staff. So number 1, you're going to set yourself up with a line of music like you normally do. Bar line, divide in half, 2 more bar lines, divide in quarters, final bar line at the end, percussion clef, time signature. If you're doing 8 measures, obviously just a regular bar line at the end of measure 4, and then the final bar line at the end of measure 8. Then for step number 2, you're going to write your start repeat sign where you want people to bounce back to. Now in this case, the start repeat sign is on measure 2. So basically what we're doing is we're coloring over the regular bar line with the thick part of our final bar line to make that start repeat sign right there. And then step number 3 is to write the next repeat sign, because remember, we don't want people to go all the way to the end. You want to keep them contained within the line of staff. So we're going to write the second repeat sign there. So with this, people would go boom, 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 just like that. So our end repeat sign bounces us back to our start repeat sign, and then we skip the end repeat sign and go to the end. Last one for us to talk about is how to write repeat signs over multiple lines of staff. So let's say you have 8 measures that you want to do an original rhythmic composition on. All you're going to do is set up your 8 measures like you normally would. Remember your regular bar line here, your final bar line here, and remember percussion clefs on both lines of the staff. Then what you'll do is you'll decide where you want to have your start and your end repeat sign. In this case, we put the start repeat sign here, and we put the end repeat sign here. So what this piece looks like, get ready, this is, you can get squiggly. We start, we go from here to here, in which case we bounce back to here. We go through one more time to the end. Squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. This is almost identical in the way it works to the double repeat sign here, except the end repeat sign is just 1 measure forward. It's in measure 6 as opposed to measure 7. In this example right here, you can see that in the clapping tying example, it was here and it's just moved here. So you can put repeat signs wherever you want in your music for your compositions. And I will see you in the next lesson. Oh, but it's not over yet. Click here to watch the next video lesson, or up here for the full video playlist.